Welcome back to DidsburyFM, Didsbury Fabulous Mums and Dads. Our next speaker this evening is Rosemary Kay, Rose for short. Rose, welcome.
Lovely to be here, thank you for inviting me.
Rose, you're a Didsbury resident
Yeah.
and your official title is you're a screenwriter.
Yes. Well, I write lots of things, but one of the things I do is screenwriting.
Well, let's start sort of from the last thing you said. What is a screenwriter?
I write mainly for TV and film. So a screenplay is for a film, that might be a script, or I'm doing an awful lot of television, multi-episode dramas.
Okay. And what are the qualifications to become that? Sorry, I'm thinking
People
about...
are always asking me that. So I go to careers conventions and people say, how can I become a writer? And I say there are as many ways into it as there are writers. It's not like being a doctor or even a lawyer where it's a much clearer path. All I can do is tell you how I got into it.
Yes, well, tell us
I was a lecturer at university and decided that I wanted to do something creative, so I wrote something in my summer holidays and sent it off. I sent one to the BBC. There was a BBC competition for TV drama, and there was also a radio competition for radio drama, and I sent them off, and then things came back from there, and people started to make my work, and then I stopped being a screenwriter for a while because my son died, and I couldn't write about anything else apart from him, so I wrote a story.
Yes.
I don't call it a novel because, as I've discovered more recently, it's a hybridized narrative because it's true, and I use a lot of truth in there and a lot of verified fact about the dates and what happened in the hospitals. But I do have it's obviously fictional as well. There's a really clear fictional element to it as well, so I put the two together.
And that was made into a film.
And then that got made into a film, and I wrote the screenplay for that film, and that's how I then got into writing for film and television.
I see.
So it's a very weird, you wouldn't want that particular path into it, would you? But people, if you speak to anyone, they all have their own paths into it. They've got a story to tell, and we all have stories to tell, and they're nearly always interesting. I bet, every single person in this room has got a great story to tell, and it's just how do you tell it? Some people tell it for television, some people do it in poetry, some people have a blog, there's lots of different ways to tell those stories.
Yeah. And you wrote a book also about that awful experience. What's the book called?
Well, it was called, in this country, Between Two Eternities. But because there was an argument about whether it was fact or fiction, so in this country it was called non-fiction, and they wanted to call it, the publishers had a headline in this country, wanted to call it non-fiction, and they gave it the title Between Two Eternities. But in America and Canada and other places in the world, in its translation, they wanted to call it Saul, which is the name of the baby it was about, and they wanted it to be on the shelves with other novels. So there's even a discussion about what is it, which is why I call it a book rather than a novel. But the film is a completely different thing again, and that is definitely a fiction. And I was very clear with the BBC, who were the main funders for it, that it was a fiction.
Yes.
When I first wanted to write about it, I knew that it had to be a book because you have more control over books. And I wanted to have control over the material because it was obviously very personal, and it was very important that I told Saul's story and that I gave him a voice and that his story wasn't taken over and used in any cynical way. And I knew that you don't have as much control over film because film is very collaborative. You work with lots of different people and you have to be the sort of person who is happy to take feedback and say, well, okay, this is my vision, but I can see that your perspective, the cinematographer, or the sound person, or the costume person, they have their own perspective as well, and you have to work with them. And film was very, very different.
Yes, I bet. Can I ask, as a Didsbury resident, you've got two other children.
Yeah.
How old are they?
Fred is 11, and Ruby, but she's actually changed her name by default to Robin. The reason I say that is because Janet is in the audience, and they both went to Janet's nursery, so Janet knows her as Ruby. But she's a very feisty, very feminist, very politicised, and she decided that Ruby was far too girly, and she wanted a name that was completely gender neutral. And young people are much more aware of that, I've come to know through her, than we are. And she says I'm gender fluid, and she wants to express herself in different ways and not be identified just as a female. So she changed her name by default to Robin.
Interesting.
She is a very interesting character. Yeah.
Yes. We should get her on in due course, I'm sure.
If you can get her out of bed.
Yeah, well, actually, we've got some teenagers here who are out of bed. Can I ask you about some of your other projects? So you wrote the book and you've written lots of things for television. And
yes, for a while I was always being asked to write things about babies, and particularly babies who were going to die or had died or some sort of trauma. You become the go-to person for that sort of thing. And I had to say to my agent, really, I don't want to write any more about that. I want to write about something else. So the projects I'm doing at the moment, you have to have lots of projects. I'm not a screenwriter who writes other people's ideas.
Right.
I make my own ideas and then I have to sell those and I have to get somebody excited and to get the funding, which has a very high attrition rate, so I have a huge amount of projects at any one time. But mainly I'm interested in young people and the relationships with their parents or with society. And so the two main ones that are going into production at the moment, I've got one with it's about a British mother-daughter relationship, but they're in Finland, and so it's being produced by the Finnish broadcasting company, Yle. And it is about teenage mental health. Yes. And it's something that I feel very strongly about because my daughter, who's 18, has had lots of friends and who are really struggling, and we have got, I think, a bit of a problem at the moment that we're not dealing with as a society very well. Maybe we're not aware of it.
Even in Didsbury.
Oh, yes, even in Didsbury. It's right across the board, and it's not just to do with deprived families or very rich families, or it goes right across all demographics, all races, all religions, and I'm sort of trying to explore why that is. Is it because of the internet? Is it because of that we're so much more connected to the world and more aware of how tough the rest of the world is at the moment? The world is a bit, in my opinion, a bit crazy at the moment, and these teenagers know it.
Yes.
So I'm very interested to know why there is this. There's no doubt about it that there is an exponential growth in teenage mental illness. So that's one of my projects, and the other project is the sort of flip of that, which has just been commissioned by BBC Scotland. Is a film about, and the producer came to me and said, would you be interested in writing something about this, because she herself, and she's very open about it, her son is very violent towards her. And she, having done the research into this area, there's a form of domestic violence that is very, very rarely spoken about, and it's teenagers being violent towards their parents. And as I've researched it, I've discovered it's a much bigger problem than we think, but it's really hidden. You know, about 20 years ago, domestic violence of usually male on female, yes, but it can be the other way around, but that was kept quiet, and there was a lot of agony behind closed doors. And now that has become a lot more well known. We've had things like The Archers, in which they showed coercive, control.
Yeah. The Archers radio programme.
Yes. And they had a fantastic storyline. I don't actually listen to it, but I did start listening to it when they had this storyline, which was about a woman being controlled by her husband, and of course the rest of the community didn't understand and didn't know. And it's brought it out into the open a lot more, and we don't blame the victims of domestic violence as much as we used to. We used to say, well, she probably deserves it, I know it must be because she's caused it somehow. We're now aware that it's much more nuanced and much more difficult than that. But the issue of teenagers attacking their parents, we don't know a lot about that. So this is going to be a story, a film in which we lift the lid on that a little bit and find out how it happens, why it happens, and the repercussions of how it happens. And of course it is also about the anguish that the teenager's going through. There must be a reason why the teenager is becoming so violent towards the person the parents that he obviously loves. So I tend to do things that I feel very passionately about. I can't do something that is, I do things that are very trivial for money sometimes. I don't intend to put money into it.
Well, you need to pay a mortgage.
I do have to pay the mortgage, and the kids do need to eat, and I can't go to Tesco's and say, I'm really sorry, I'm doing something so important at the moment that nobody will pay me for. So I do write all sorts of things, but they're the two that I feel quite passionate about because I think they're quite important, and drama is fantastic at getting inside these sort of stories. And getting you to care about those characters, and then and seeing yourself, and that's my aim, is that you can go, oh my God, what would I do if that happened to me? And with the book, I got so much, which was about me losing my son, and about neonatal intensive care, which was a big shock to me when it happened. Isn't so much of a shock now, you've seen it a lot more on television. But I got letters from all over the world from people saying, thank you so much for telling that story, because it gave me a voice. Yeah. Nobody knew what I'd been through, but now I can give that book to my family and say, this is the sort of thing that we went through. And I think that's what's great about storytelling, that you can do that and you can actually help people. I used to think, what a stupid job I've got. Why can't I be a doctor and do something important, or a politician and do something that actually matters? But then when you do touch people and you realise you have helped them a little bit, I think storytelling I've become to realise that storytelling is really important for our society, and to listen to each other's stories and swap. And what you're doing is fantastic, because you're making us swap stories and listen to each other, and that's a really valuable thing.
Thank you. That's really nice. It threw me there. Can I ask you about the impact of the Media City, BBC moving up to Manchester, on screenwriters such as yourself, storytellers? Maybe there's a Didsbury community, I don't know, but has it had a positive impact, less of a positive? I'm hoping you're going to say yes.
I'd really love to say yes. There was for a while. Because I'm in fiction. If I was in documentary, or if I was just saying before, if I was in if I wrote children's drama, or children's documentary, or children's programmes, that is really strong up here now, and that's fantastic. Sport is fantastic and documentary, but with drama, unfortunately, they have closed the specialist Manchester drama department down, and lost some good people, and they've just dispersed around the country and gone from the BBC, to be honest.
Yeah, I see.
So I always have to go to London or Scotland. Sometimes I go to, or in fact Finland or Paris. I'm doing something with Canal Plus. So you are very international now.
Yeah.
It would be great if the local. I mean, it is local, it's fantastic, but if I could just go to Salford all the time.
Get the tram.
And get the tram. But unfortunately, it's got so much more global, which I really am a great Europhile, and I really approve of collaboration with all cultures. So I'm doing quite a number of projects at the moment which are multilingual, and I write it in English with the knowledge, and then I just put in bracket whether it's French or whether it's, and for instance the one in Finland will have Swedes talking in it as well. The one that I'm doing for Canal Plus will have an awful lot of French speaking in it, and work with people in Italy. And I really believe that is the way forward, personally, that we collaborate with people around the world, and we tell, I'm telling a story about some refugees in Italy, because I think some of these stories need to be told, and sometimes you have to do that in collaboration with other countries.
That's really interesting. One of the things you're doing is you're doing a PhD.
Yes, I started doing a PhD. Don't ask me why.
Yes, well,
I think do ask me why. I think I always wanted to do a PhD, and I never had enough money. When I left, I come from a very disadvantaged background, and my husband does as well. We sort of got together at university, and we never had any money. So when we left university, I just had to go straight into a job. And I think I always wanted to do a PhD in my heart of hearts. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I realised I could. I do it part-time. I'm just in my last year now, so I should really be writing it up and getting on with it. I'm very lucky, actually, in that it's with the creative writing department in Manchester University, and so part of it is a novel. So I have to write a novel, and then I have to then I have to do the academic bit as well. So a novel will come out of it, which is great. And the novel is about the real Miss Havisham. Because apparently Dickens, he did use real people to make his characters all the time. He was well known for that, and he made a big thing about it. And he would say, oh, I need a really horrible justice of the peace. Does anybody know one that I can base it on? Which is really, really overt. And part of my thesis is about, when you do that, how does that affect the person? And there is some evidence that he did come across, either in research or through his children, a woman who was a bit like Miss Havisham, who got jilted at the altar and went a bit mad and cut herself off from society. And I thought, when I heard that, I thought, what must it feel like to know that you are that woman, that you've inspired? Because she's a horror, Miss Havisham. She is an absolutely horrible woman. And so my story, my novel, is about how she thinks she's inspiring. He was a rock star, Dickens, during his lifetime. She's inspiring this really famous person. And then you read the book and go, oh my God, is that me? So it's about so my thesis is about how we use real people in fiction in our stories, which is, I think there's a bit of a resonance there of we do that today. We take real people, we put them in a house and call it Big Brother, and then we gobble them up and we use those real people and turn them into something they're not for our own entertainment. So I'm sort of looking at that and the change between fiction and non-fiction.
Right. Well, just as we're approaching the end, can I ask you, I'm permitted to ask Andrew, what are your favourite things about living in South Manchester, obviously particularly Didsbury? Perhaps you can share that with us.
It's a really, really friendly place. I mean, I go to London a lot, which I love because it's very buzzy, there's a lot going on there, but it's nowhere near as friendly. And I sometimes joke that I need to get a wig and some dark glasses because every time I need to nip into Didsbury just to get a pint of milk or get something from a prescription from the chemist or something, I know I will meet about 3 people and I will have a conversation, a really great conversation that will take about 20 minutes. And by the time I've been there, it's been an hour, and I'll say to my husband, I'll be only 10 minutes, honestly, but I never am. So I do love that. It's such a warm, inviting place.
Yeah.
But I do think I maybe need to pretend I'm somebody else. Then I can nip in and out and nobody will know who I am.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Can I open this up for some questions from the audience? If people have got a question, can I ask you to put your hands up and say who you are? Oh, sorry, I'm looking over there.
So I'm just intrigued, what degree did you do? You said you did
I did a degree in English and drama when I first started. That was many, many, many years ago. And then, as I say, I went into teaching and I went into becoming a lecturer in performing arts. So yes, I did start doing that in terms of people who want to do drama. But there was no creative writing degree in those days, and there is now. And I think when they first started, the creative writing degree seemed to me a little bit cynical, that it's dead easy to get students on a creative writing course because lots of us want to do it. And when I first was working in universities, I felt like a bit of a cash cow, and that some of them were saying, in fact somebody once said to me, I want them hanging from the rafters, and I said, well, I can get them hanging from the rafters, but I actually want them to be sitting down in a space. You have to give us the space, and of course they thought we didn't need space. So, but I do think there has been a sea change, and that now people are realising the value of being able to write creatively and to tell stories, and certainly the Manchester University department I feel quite proud to be part of.
Yeah. So. Fantastic. Well, I know Didsbury Arts Festival had a workshop called Creative Writing, actually, which was very popular.
Yes, I can imagine it was really well attended. Yeah. And there's lots of ways that it can be important. I mean, I make a living from it, but you don't have to do it to make a living. It might be that you have a really important story to tell, and there is an area of creative writing called life writing, which is just about, this is my memoir. And whether you get it published or not is great if you do, but that's not the drive. The drive is to tell your story, or to tell the story of someone else who would otherwise be marginalised and would never hear their story.
Yeah. Interesting. Lady at the front.
Hi, Laurie. How different is it writing a book and writing a screenplay, and which do you prefer?
It's very, very different, and if I'm honest, and maybe I shouldn't say this because I know there's producers in the room, I really love writing a novel because you go away and you just get on with it, and then at some point someone will read it and tell you it's rubbish and you have to start again, or the editor will say, you know, you've got to make massive changes. But I do love completely getting lost in that story, whereas screenplays are much more collaborative, even from the get-go. You know, I have to write a pitch document which is a couple of lines, and then somebody will say, yeah, that's great, but can we have it going in this direction? So it's great to be collaborative, and it's a lot less lonely. I imagine if I was a novelist all the time, I might get quite lonely. So I think I get the best of both worlds, to be able to ring people up and they give me feedback, and feedback is there's a real skill to getting feedback, because if you take all the feedback you get, then it'll never be your work, and it will probably feel very like it's been written by a committee. But then if you're so arrogant that you don't take any feedback, it probably will. There are some people who are so well respected in the industry, and I won't give any names, but are so fantastic that you sometimes think, God, I wish someone had cut your script for you because it needs it. Even though you're brilliant, you still need an outside voice sometimes to help you see what you're doing.
One question there. Would you ever consider ghostwriting?
I certainly have done in the past. There have been times when I've been trying so hard to get my own work written and failing. I mean, there's a huge amount of rejection and a huge amount of failure. You know, I'm sitting here and talking about my successes. That's the tip of the iceberg. Underneath it is, you know, 90% of what I do is unsuccessful and fails and gets knocked back over and over again. And with ghostwriting, I have thought it would be great to ghostwrite.
Because the only thing a lot of people have got good ideas, but they don't know how to bring it to fruition.
Oh, absolutely, yes. And well, I will definitely help people do that. And that's so ghostwriting. I took to mean when you said that. For instance, a footballer who, and there's a whole industry of that. And there is a very well respected ghostwriter who lives in Didsbury, actually, at least he used to. I might put you in touch with him.
Oh, do.
You might know him, actually. He went to Didsbury CV. I think his children have just left. Anyway, I'll put you in touch with him if you're interested.
Yeah.
And that's a whole industry. What you're talking about there is more about life writing, and that is definitely something that the university does and helps people get their story out. But you share it more then.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to get to is the fact that a lot of people have really good ideas, but to actually get it to a publishing point of view, you can get it to 80%, it's that last 20% of quality.
Yes.
Before you go to an editor who then they can turn it from a fail to a
yes. Well, I would certainly, I mean, that's partly why I've wanted to work at the university, because you can certainly do that. So if somebody wanted to come to the university and get someone like me to work on their work with them, because often it's just, like you say, it's only the 10% just to push it up. The ideas and the passion and the story and
is there.
Is there.
It's the actual
and just it's polishing it up, and it's also knowing how the system works so that you can press the right buttons, because otherwise. I haven't actually, but I'm very happy to give you my details. I can connect you. Because the thing is, the industry, particularly the TV and film industry, is always looking. They're very hungry for ideas, but they are very, very closed. I mean, maybe the producer will be able to fill you in on this differently, but from my perspective, they're very closed to new people trying to break through. They say they're always trying to create workshops to get new writers in, but actually, when it comes to commissioning, there's a little cabal at the top who usually get the cream of it. And so people who come along who've got great ideas can find it very hard trying to feel outside, trying to get in. So if you want to talk to me afterwards, that's please do.
Great. Well, I know we've got one more speaker, so you're going to be here for a while, Rose. People want to speak to you afterwards. Can I thank everybody for being here with us, particularly Rose, obviously. And I wonder if you could thank her in the usual way.